I was never supposed to know what it feels like to be prey. Not like this. Not as something meant to be hunted and savored. The Emperor built the Imperium so that humanity would never again tremble before alien predators, so that we would stand tall as rulers of the stars. Yet here I am, Guardsman Orenvale of the Armageddon 17th, stranded alone on the jungle moon of Valor 9, discovering the same dread our ancestors once felt when they first stared into the darkness and found hungry eyes staring back. The first warning wasn't what I saw, but what I heard, or rather, didn't. A jungle never truly falls quiet. Normally, there's the endless buzz of insects, the rustle of animals, the drip of moisture from broad leaves. But all of that shifted into something unnatural. The sounds became too organized, too deliberate, like the difference between random rainfall and the steady tread of something vast. Even the insects stopped in waves, not all at once, as though driven outward from some unseen center. Small creatures fled in lines, not in panic, but in strange, coordinated streams. Before I laid eyes on a single Tyranid, the jungle itself revealed they were here. It moved with them. It breathed with them. It washed with them. Captain Dishran had warned us in his briefings about the Tyranid vanguard. He said they arrived long before the hive fleet itself, seeding the air with spores, twisting the DNA of local life, reshaping the land into a living network that the swarm can later consume. By the time the fleet darkens the sky, the planet is already half digested. What he didn't explain was what it feels like to realize you're walking through the stomach of something vast and patient, something already dissolving you before you even know it's begun. Our regiment had been posted to Valor 9 for routine garrison duty. The moon was once a lush agri-world, its jungles cultivated to supply the nearby Forge world. Heliast Prime, with vital organic compounds. Perfect climate, dense canopy, humid air, it was ideal for harvest. But Valor 9 also sits on the edge of the Odoacer Gap, a stretch of space where strange sightings had troubled the Imperial Navy patrols. 3 weeks ago, we arrived on the transport Crown of Thorns, a massive vessel large enough to carry 2 regiments and all their gear. The Armageddon 17th is no elite unit. We're not stormtroopers, not grenadiers, just regular infantry. Men and women pulled from the hive world of Armageddon, handed lost guns, and shipped wherever the Imperium needs bodies. Valor 9 was considered low risk. No battles in over 300 years. Our jobs were simple: patrol the farms, guard the shipments, and occasionally shoot at the local wildlife if it got too bold. The worst we faced was a pack of so-called ghost claws. Jungle predators not much worse than oversized cats. A few lost bolts scattered them easily. We got comfortable, too comfortable. That complacency would kill us. 5 days ago, the Vox channel started filling with static. The tech priest, Sorvian, said it was just solar flares. 2 days later, the astropath went silent. Warp turbulence, they said. Then yesterday, 3 outposts stopped reporting. Only then did Captain Dishran order a patrol. I was in that patrol. 10 guardsmen under Sergeant Thale, a scarred veteran who claimed he'd earned his wound from a rebel's poisoned blade, though when drunk he'd admit it came from a bar fight. He wasn't clever, but he was steady, the sort of man the guard survives on. At dawn, we boarded a Chimera transport and rolled out along the gravel road that wound, through the jungle between the main facility and the 3 outlying stations. The greenery pressed close, the canopy filtering morning sunlight into a sickly green glow. The air inside the Chimera was suffocating, even with the environmental systems straining at full power. Sweat soaked through our fatigues within minutes, and condensation dripped down the walls. Kiv, our Vox operator, tried again and again to raise contact, but all he could get was static. It wasn't random either. It had a strange rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. It made my teeth ache. I dismissed it at the time, but later I would understand what it meant. After about an hour, we reached the first outpost. From a distance, we knew something was wrong. The structure still stood, but the defense lights were dead. The automated turret hung lifelessly. And worst of all, no one challenged our approach. Sergeant Thale had the driver stop the Chimera well short of the gate. He was cautious by nature, but I could see unease written in the lines of his scarred face. He had the gunner sweep the treeline with the heavy bolter while he tried, raising survivors on the Vox. Nothing but that pulsing static answered back. At last, Thale gave the order. Delson stayed behind the bolter while the rest of us disembarked. We moved into a textbook skirmish line, lost guns ready. Overlapping fields of fire as we advanced. The jungle around us seemed to shrink back into silence. Even the insects had stopped. The only sound left was our boots, crunching gravel and the soft drip of moisture from the canopy above. We reached the outpost without incident. Thales signaled Renault, one of the younger troopers, to check the door. He reported back that it was unlocked, a clear violation of protocol. Thales sent Renault and Marsden inside to secure the building while the rest of us held the perimeter. For half a minute, there was nothing. Then Renault's voice crackled over the squad vox, strained but steady. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Thales motioned for me and Corporal Jessen to join him, while the others stayed outside. The interior was lit only by the dim red glow of emergency strips. The main power was gone, and the backup generator had been torn apart, ripped open like a tin can, its machinery shredded by claws far too large to be human. But it wasn't the ruined generator. That froze us in place. It was the guardsmen, or what was left of them, for men had been stationed here. Their remains were scattered across the main room, but not haphazardly. Each body had been dissected with chilling precision, every layer separated and arranged in a grotesque order. Skin here, muscle there, organs and bones neatly laid out as if part of some monstrous study. Their faces, those that were still intact, showed they'd been alive when it began. There was no blood, not a drop. Whatever had done this had drained every fluid cleanly, as if it had been harvested. The usual stench of death was absent too, replaced by a cloying, sickly sweet smell like rotting fruit. Thales crossed himself with the sign of the Aquila and whispered a prayer. Jessen, hardened by 15 years in the guard, doubled over and vomited. Renault stood pale and frozen, while Marsden edged toward the door, clutching his lost gun so tight his knuckles turned white. I remember thinking, with a strange calm, this isn't the work of rebels, pirates, or anything human. The way those bodies had been dissected was cold, clinical, something beyond human cruelty. Whoever or whatever did this hadn't seen the guardsmen as enemies, or even as food. They were specimens. Then I noticed something worse. The remains weren't still. The parts twitched faintly, expanding and contracting as though trying to breathe. From them stretched thin, glassy tendrils, linking flesh and bone together in a mockery of nerves. My stomach turned, but before I could speak, the vox on Thales' belt hissed to life. Delson's voice, high and panicked, cut through the static. Movement in the trees, multiple contacts. Emperor's blood, they're all around us. Thales didn't hesitate. He barked for a withdrawal, and we rushed back into the dim green light outside. What I saw there will haunt me until the end of my days. The Chimera was surrounded. Shapes moved in the jungle shadows, not wild animals, but coordinated, deliberate forms. Small skittering things with too many limbs. Winged creatures darting between branches. Larger silhouettes lingered just out of sight, slow and patient. Delson opened up with the heavy bolter, its thunder echoing through the canopy. I saw one of the smaller beasts burst apart under a direct hit, showering ichor across the undergrowth. But for each one that fell, 3 more appeared. We sprinted for the Chimera, firing as we ran. Lost bolts hissed through the humid air, burning into alien flesh. The creatures never flinched. Even crippled, they dragged themselves forward, relentless. Marsden didn't make it. The ground split beneath him, and a mass of claws and fangs surged upward. He screamed once before he was dragged under. A moment later, the soil closed, erasing any trace he'd been there at all. The rest of us stumbled into the Chimera's rear hatch. Thales was last, firing his lost gun until the pack ran dry. He slammed the hatch shut just as something slammed into it from outside, hard enough to dent the reinforced steel. "Drive," he roared. The transport jolted forward, crushing several of the smaller things beneath its tracks. The hull rang with the constant pounding of claws and bodies as the swarm hurled itself at us. Inside, Kiv tried desperately to raise the compound, but the Vox gave him only that cursed static. Thales snapped for him to switch to emergency channels and broadcast a general warning. The driver pushed the Chimera faster, but the jungle itself seemed alive against us. Branches lashed at the vision blocks, vines dragged at the hull, and twice we nearly overturned avoiding fallen trees that hadn't been there before. That was when I heard it, a faint scratching above. A moment later, metal screamed as something cut through the roof. A serrated limb, part blade and part insect claw, punched through the steel as though it were paper. It withdrew, then stabbed down again, nearly skewering Renault's head. Thale yelled for concentrated fire. We turned our lost guns upward, filling the transport with the stink of ozone and scorched plating. The attacks from above faltered, but only briefly. Then the driver screamed. Something had struck the front vision block, cracking the armored glass. Through the splintered web of fractures, I glimpsed it, a creature clinging to the hull, its many eyes fixed on the man behind the wheel. The glass shattered. The thing poured inside. The creature moved faster than my eyes could follow. One moment the driver was there. The next he was being dragged through the shattered viewport, his scream ending in a wet tear of flesh. The chimera lurched violently, plowing through undergrowth before slamming into a tree trunk. The crash hurled us against our restraints. I heard Jessen's arm snap like a twig. For a heartbeat, there was silence, only the hiss of the wounded engine and the groans of injured men. Then the assault began again. Bladed limbs tore at the roof, peeling it back like foil. Through the ruined front compartment, I glimpsed more creatures gathering, all moving with that dreadful, unified purpose. Out! Everyone out the rear hatch. Thale shouted. Grab what you can. Form a circle once clear. We spilled into the humid night, firing wildly as we scrambled to form up. The air was thick with the stink of rot, and that same cloying sweetness I'd smelled at the outpost. Somehow, we managed to form a ring, backs together, lost guns outward. Only 8 of us remained. Marsden was gone. The driver was gone. Jessen clutched his shattered arm, trying to steady his weapon with his good hand. The jungle pressed in around us. I could hear the Xenos circling just beyond sight, branches shifting, leaves rustling, the occasional flash of a carapace in the gloom. But never enough for a clean shot. Kiv. Status. Thale demanded, his voice iron steady. Still nothing but static, Sergeant, Kiv replied. But there's a pattern now. Almost like words. But not in any tongue I know. Keep trying. The rest of you, conserve ammo. Fire only on a clear target. We moved toward the compound. Stay tight. Watch your sectors. We pushed forward in formation, each of us covering a slice of the perimeter. The jungle fought us every step, dense and suffocating. Vines snagged my legs as though alive, forcing me to cut myself free. Shapes shadowed us, darting forward and vanishing, forcing nervous troopers to waste shots into empty foliage. I realized too late this was deliberate, bleeding us of ammunition. We'd been moving 20 minutes when Harl cried out. Blood poured from his eyes and nose as he clawed at his face. Get it out, he screamed. Emperor, it's inside my head. Before anyone could stop him, he jammed his lost gun under his chin and fired. His body collapsed to the jungle floor in a spray of bone and brain. For a heartbeat, silence. Then I thought I heard it, distant laughter, drifting through the trees. Fear gripped us all. 7 left now. Thale ordered us on, but the sense of doom weighed heavier than any gear. None of us truly believed we'd leave this moon alive. When the next attack came, it wasn't the frontal assault we braced for. The ground beneath our boots softened, turning to sucking mire. We began to sink, the earth swallowing us as though alive. Our formation shattered. Panic set in. Bolts of lost fire cut brief bursts of light through the jungle. Screams rose from every side. I fired blindly, not to hit anything, but just to see. By some luck, I dragged myself onto firmer ground, boots sinking into a tangle of roots. Thale's voice carried through the chaos, shouting orders, steady even now. Form up. On me. For the Emperor. I stumbled toward his voice, but before I reached him, a new sound froze me in place. It was a scream, but not one of fear or pain. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was the sound of a mind breaking, of a soul being devoured. I knew the voice, Thale, but nothing in 15 years of service had ever shaken him. That scream went on forever, twisting in ways no human throat should be able to make, and ended in a wet, choking sound. I ran. Emperor, forgive me, but I ran, not toward Thale, not toward my squad, but away from that horrible sound. I crashed through the undergrowth with no care for noise or direction. I only wanted distance between me and whatever had reduced Sergeant Thale to that final, inhuman cry. I don't know how long I ran. In the dim green light of the jungle, time lost meaning. Eventually, exhaustion forced me to stop. I slumped against the trunk of a massive tree, chest heaving as I dragged in the heavy air. Then I realized the jungle was silent. No insects buzzed. No creatures called. Even the drip of water from the canopy had stopped. It was as if the entire moon held its breath. I checked what I had left. My lost gun still worked, though the charge indicator was below 20%. My combat knife was secure. 3 ration packs. A half-full canteen. A handful of spare power cells. My Vox bead still sat in my ear, whispering that same rhythmic static whenever I tried to use it. Most important of all, my panic had burned itself out. What remained was cold, focused. Survival now meant discipline and clear thinking. I forced myself to recall the tactical briefings. Knowledge is a weapon, maybe the only one I had left. These creatures were almost certainly genestealers, or something like them. Vanguard organisms. Scouts sent ahead of the main hive fleet to infiltrate, map, and corrupt a world before the swarm descends. They'd be cataloging life forms, learning our weaknesses, laying psychic nodes to guide the invasion. That sweet smell I'd noticed at the outpost and here in the jungle, it was spores, rewriting the very air. Even the insects. Strange migrations pointed to a biosphere already reshaped at the molecular level. That meant the fleet wasn't far. Days, maybe, not weeks. And even if I survived these vanguard creatures, this moon would soon become uninhabitable. My only chance was to reach the main compound and somehow get off-world, before the sky filled with living ships. A faint hope, but the only one left. I used the gaps in the canopy to find my bearings. Northeast lay the compound, 15 kilometers as the crow flies. On foot, through jungle crawling with Tyranid patrols, it meant at least 2 days. I set out quietly, every step deliberate, every breath measured. I became a shadow moving between trees, my whole being narrowed to the single goal of survival. As dusk fell, I searched for shelter. A hollow at the base of a massive tree offered cover. Its entrance was narrow enough to defend with my knife if something found me. I crawled inside and camouflaged the opening with fallen leaves. Sleep was dangerous, but I needed it. I would allow myself short, shallow rests, 15 minutes at most, my knife in my hand, my lost gun across my lap. Before closing my eyes, I whispered a prayer to the Emperor, not for deliverance. His reach felt too far even here, but for the strength to meet my death with dignity when it came. The night dragged on in shallow snatches of sleep, each one shattered by the smallest sound from the jungle. Twice I heard movement close by, the faint rasp of chitin scraping against bark. Each time I gripped my knife tighter, waiting for discovery, but both times the sound moved on. Dawn brought no comfort. The light only revealed horrors that the dark had hidden. I crawled from my hiding place and pushed northeast again, moving carefully from one patch of cover to the next. By mid-morning, I found the first body. Not a soldier, one of the agri-workers. He was suspended between 2 trees and strands of some living web. His chest was opened with precision, his organs removed. But impossibly, he still lived. His eyes followed me as I approached, begging silently. I whispered a prayer as I pressed my lost gun to his temple and gave him mercy. The shot echoed through the jungle, far too loud, and I immediately regretted it. I moved on quickly, but his pleading gaze stayed with me. The thought struck me that he might have been left there as bait. The Xenos had shown cunning already. What better way to draw out survivors? The idea chilled me. As I went deeper, I found more victims. Some guardsmen, some civilians, all mutilated, all alive despite wounds that should have killed them, all placed along the natural escape routes leading toward the compound. It wasn't random. They were hurting us, studying us. I changed course, forcing my way through the densest jungle I could find. If the obvious paths were kill zones, I'd avoid them even if it slowed me to a crawl. Vines ripped at my uniform, thorns tore skin, insects gnawed at me without pause. But I pressed on, one step at a time, clinging to the animal urge to live. Late in the day, I heard it, a human voice. Weak, pained, calling for help. It came from a clearing beyond a wall of foliage. Every instinct screamed trap. The Tyranids had already shown they could keep human tissue alive, twisting it to their own use. What better lure than a cry for aid? But I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a chance of a survivor, my duty demanded I check. I crept forward and parted the leaves. Jessen, He lay in the middle of the clearing. His broken arm had become something else entirely, fused with pale alien growths that anchored him to the ground. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. His lips formed the same words again and again, "Help me." But his blind eyes stared only at the canopy above. Around the edges of the clearing, I counted at least 6 Tyranids, half concealed among the trees, perfectly still, waiting. It was a trap. Jessen was the bait. The smart choice was to back away, circle wide, and keep moving. But I stayed, rooted to the spot, unable to look away. It wasn't just cruelty. It was an experiment. Jessen wasn't prey. He was a test subject. The tendrils pulsing from his body into the soil weren't just restraining him. They were collecting something. His fear.